Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Matt Shanks from Lightyears. Thanks to the SEANZ team for inviting me to speak. It's a real honour, and I hope what I've got to share is interesting and informative. And thanks to REC again for the lunch. Look, it's great to see so many familiar faces in the room, and while I'm talking on behalf of a pioneering developer, it's I think there's almost someone at every table in this room who has played a part in our journey to date. So it's just really cool to see everyone here who's been part of that. It's a pretty exciting space to be in, as I'm sure you'll all agree. So I'm going to start with a bit of background about Lightyears Solar and our journey over the last sort of 4.5 years. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our Waiuku project and sort of some of the learnings from that and a bit about that project. And I'll finish up with our views on sort of trends in the large-scale solar space and sort of future issues that we're potentially all going to have to deal with. So Sean Tobin and I founded Lightyears back in 2019. He's just sitting down there, but he doesn't like the spotlight, so maybe we'll get him up for questions at the end. I'm an electrical engineer by background. I've worked on grid projects in transmission and distribution for about 15 years, mainly high voltage substations. So if Alison's here, I share that thrill that she had. But also a fair bit of hydro, wind and solar overseas in Pacific and Southeast Asia. I'm personally sort of quite motivated by the ideal of bringing cheap, clean energy to the country for two main reasons. One is sort of to reduce energy hardship in New Zealand. We shouldn't have that. But also just to encourage like massive electrification. I've seen people with those T-shirts that are like electrify everything. That's sort of how I feel. I mean, obviously doing it with clean energy is just like the only no-brainer. I guess the other thing, Sean and I just like building stuff, so that's sort of one of the reasons we've got into this. There's a bit more of the team there at our Waiuku site, and Sasha the pig, who is sort of, that's why the photo's offside. It's a big part of the team's the giant breeding pigs on that farm. So look, the idea for Lightyears really came from what was shared earlier, that the forecasts are that we need 400 to 500 megs of new generation in the country every year for 30 years. It's pretty much all going to be solar, wind, and potentially some geothermal. At the same time, you would have seen the Brendan's presentation this morning, where the component prices have dropped down to parity essentially a couple of years ago. And so, back in 2019, it looked like no one was doing solar, and we were just like, at scale, of course. So we were thinking, where's all this going to come from? And thought we need to be doing solar at pace in this country and at scale. I mean, 500 megs a year, we're not even touching that yet. Hopefully we will be within sort of 5 to 10 years as a country. So we put together a business case for a solar farm. It was around about the 3 meg scale at the time. And naively I went and knocked on the front door of Genesis and asked for a PPA. I'm glad I didn't sign that one. We put together a business case and it seemed to stack up, and we had a bit of a look around for land. Mangataroto GXP and North Power's network has the highest nodal pricing pretty consistently in the country, so we thought, well, let's find somewhere around there to kind of stack the deck as much as we can. And we ended up buying a piece of land up there, about 5.5 hectares, and we thought, if the worst comes to the worst, we can back ourselves, build the project in stages if we have to, and self-fund it. So that was the plan. We shopped the idea around for investment for about 18 months, starting in early 2020, and sort of just touching again on Brendan's comments from earlier in the day. Most people were still like, solar is not going to work in New Zealand, like large-scale solar doesn't stack up. New Zealand's too cloudy, all this type of stuff. And I mean, the other thing is the wholesale rates were around $75 to $80 back then, before we sort of hit that recent spike in pricing. But look, eventually we worked with Infratech for quite a while to get them on board with the project, and move the development on as a sort of shovel-ready type arrangement to Infratech well in early 22. And yeah, glad they picked up the baton there and taking it through to completion now. I mean, this was, I think, about a week or two ago, so I imagine they've got modules up by now. They're just smashing it out. So I just wanted to sort of point out a few things about this, one of them being the time frame. We put our initial application in with the great team over here at the front table in February 2020 and signed a connection agreement 2 and a bit years later in 2022. So I don't think that's not an outrageous time frame as far as connection agreements go. I think North Power and us have learnt a lot along the way there. It's probably one of the earlier connection agreements and processes we've been through. And Shane Ruxton's not here, but pass on my regards to the dear man. And I called Raj every Thursday for a period of about 6 months just to try and push things along. So in terms of construction, we had a go live date of February 2021, and all our plans, our investment memorandums, and you can see that that's highly ambitious. Yeah, Infratech are building it now. I've heard, just a shout out to them, I've heard that they're sort of the gold standard in construction of solar farms. Isn't that right, Nick? And I think Gary's employed them too. But look, they're putting in, you can see a 2P Schledder fixed system there. I think it's still a Power Electronics hemp and bifacial Canadian. So that's the bit on the tech side there. So while we were working on this project, the industry sort of started picking up a bit in New Zealand in 2020, 2021, and we were starting to get a bit of inbound inquiry for projects of this scale, and we thought, help, we better start developing a few more. So I've got a little list there of consented projects we have, which yes, it's sort of 35 spread over 6 sites. Nomai's obviously with Infratech now, and there's a couple of others in there that are being built by other parties. We've recently just completed the 2.4 meg site down in Waiuku, and the bottom 2 on the list, we'll just sort of gearing up to build those right now. So we've settled on a niche of sort of 5 to 10 megawatt solar farms, and they're exclusively distribution connected. We started out with that size. One of the primary drivers for that was sort of looking at the New Zealand solar construction market and capability, and we thought, well, you know, going out and saying you're going to build a 100 meg solar farm when the largest thing built so far is 2.1 in Kapuni just seemed like a bit of a bold claim. So we thought, well, let's start at the scale, 5 to 10 type of thing, and that sort of aligns well with construction. Also, the financing story, getting lenders and investors over the line on a sort of under $10 million project is we thought would be easier than 100 meg. The jury's still out on that, but I guess the risk appetite, the risks are, it might be a $10,000 mistake rather than a $100,000 mistake if you get something wrong. Also, they're quick to market, I think, compared with transmission connected, particularly if you have to build a new grid exit point or GIP. So our intent with what we're doing now is we're developing these projects through to shovel ready, and where we can, we're putting them into our build stack and building these now. So I've got a picture here that kind of the sort of untold story of solar development, I guess, is the red dots. While it's great that we've got sites in development and construction, there's a much greater number that didn't progress or we stalled for some reason over the last few years. I'll talk a bit about the process we go through with development. And I guess the other thing, when we started Lightyears, we were cold calling people. We put ads in farming publications trying to find land. And now we get about 1 to 2 inbound inquiries a week from farmers, which we can barely keep up with, to be honest. But the projects normally start, like if you've got a farmer approaching you, they're already on board. So a number of those sites I showed before have been farmer initiated. So it's really good having that buy-in, because they're already thinking solar's the way, solar's the future. So once we've sort of engaged with them, we don't proceed to a lease straight away. We go and look at the network, which is, I think, the number one thing to think about. People have talked about grid. We're going to run into grid constraints. There's a lot of places we've looked at where you simply can't even connect it, or the cost to connect is just out of proportion for the project. So we consider the potential for competition in the area as well. Like Northland's pretty busy, I'd say, up there. There's a lot going on that Josie and the team touched on before. So really, it's around right sizing the project for the grid. Like if there's 6 megawatts in a location, we don't normally go for all 6 because there's no wiggle room. If people start putting rooftop solar in that area, you're going to get constrained out. So we sort of try and dial things back a little bit. Maybe go for there's a bit of a juggle there, right? And then there's equipment and things like that, equipment sizing. So once we've done that piece, put the initial application in, then we look at the land, any issues around consenting, topography, flood, geotech, that type of stuff. That's kind of the process. So these stalled developments would typically be because of the network. There's too many risks, it's too expensive. But also we've had unrealistic lease expectations from farmers sometimes, or the sites are flood prone, or the soil's just, I guess there's geotech risks, like a lot of the Hauraki is quite wet, but also prone to sea level rise and inundation from that. So you kind of get a feel for these things after a while. But look, I'll talk a bit about Waiuku now. We've built this on a working 48 hectare farm. It's 3.5 hectares of array, mainly 1P tracker, but you can see some bits and pieces of fixed tilt. It's not the ideal rectangular site. Neither of it is it flat. It's in the sort of rolling pukekohe contour. But the farm is a personal friend of ours, so we thought, well, if we can make it work here, it's a good showroom, and if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere, is what we've realised. We went with a 800 volt AC reticulation with large scale string inverters. It seemed to be at the time the way that the industry was going with string inverters was to an 800 volt AC side, and since we made that decision, there's been more and more inverters coming out at that voltage. So pleased we went that way, and obviously that just means your cable sizing is a bit smaller and lower balance of system costs there. So it did make the AC switchboard a bit more difficult because some of the circuit breakers you can't source locally, and they had to come from Europe. I don't know. Ask the Mackay guys. We went with large format modules, which are about 38 kilos each. So they're quite easily handled by a 2-person lift. We had 1% breakages during construction. I think we'd budgeted for about 2.5% to 3% breakages. And a lot of that was through mechanical handling, so forklifts and trucks and things like that, rather than manual handling or people dropping them. Just something to note, I guess it's more of probably a bit of a safety issue, is some of those large format modules come in vertical stacks, like a fridge basically, probably weigh about as much as a fridge. So they can tip over. There's a risk they tip over, and it's just really something to be aware of if you're using those, is to figure out a safe way to handle them. Or you can buy them in landscape, but you only get about 50% capacity in a container. So yeah, look, we're selling the power to Prime Energy, who over a 10-year term. At the time, there was a lot of sort of uncertainty around lockdowns in China, shipping and stuff. So we procured the switch room and transformer locally in New Zealand. The transformer, just to sort of touch on timeframes again, took more than 12 months, about 12, 13 months, I think. So it's a single longest lead item. So look, I'll talk about a few good things about the project. We've really worked hard with the farmer to accommodate animals under the array. They currently have pigs and calves, and they fatten the calves up to about a year old and then ship them on. So we've used a design criteria of sort of 1.6 metres being the height that calves can go to, and put everything up at that height. So the bottom of all the tracker components is 1.6 metres. It was really good sort of working with them, investigating ways we could incorporate animals into the array in a safe and efficient manner. And I guess you've got that dual use thing. Then we've had a lot of support from locals, which has been really good. And when I say that, I mean contractors and suppliers just sort of calling us up, going, "Hey, are you guys building that solar farm? I'd be really keen to. I'm the local excavator operator. I'd be keen to come and dig any trenches you need," and that type of thing's been really cool. And I guess we've also developed a sort of processes and templates we can roll out across the portfolio as well. So look, I'll just touch on a few of the learnings. I guess the key learnings here, which I've got up on the screen. I've grouped them into procurement. I think we had one shipment arrive on time, and that was the modules. So we had paddocks, and we had 3,500 modules with nothing to mount them on. So the transformer drives the program completely on these things. So make sure you get your transformer order in early, and good to see Alison earlier said that Transpower is allowing people to order that sort of pre-full approvals. I'd say check all the lead times on any high voltage equipment, things like that. And if you can, go up to China and check the gear in the factory if you get that opportunity. Yeah, I guess your trackers have been good to experiment with. I would say putting them on flat land is a whole lot easier than this rolling contour. And yeah, you have to put them higher for grazing, so sort of keep that in mind. So just sort of, I've got one last slide there. Oh, no, that's the timber one. So we've trialled timber. I can talk to you more about that if you want afterwards. But look, some of the trends that we see happening. This is the duck curve. I assume you've all heard of the duck curve. That's South Australia. That duck curve, and it's not zero at the bottom of the axis, by the way. That's 600 megs, but that's just something that's going to come. The few of the Transpower charges. There's obviously the harmonic allocation. We don't really know how they're dealing with that. The TPM benefit-based charge is another one to, if you haven't heard of that one, maybe ask about it. It's essentially a new pricing mechanism under the TPM that could come through to new generation projects. And look, we're seeing probably more investors wanting financial investors wanting projects that are in a constructed state rather than coming in earlier in the journey. So that's probably a shift in that investment market there. Look, I just want to finish with, I guess, a bit of a challenge for us all here in the room. And you can see the last 2 points there around consenting. We are starting to see a bit of pushback from communities, and I think we've all got a collective responsibility to bring the communities along with us through early consultation, like low impact design, and Rogier mentioned this earlier around sort of, we need to be driving a good news story about this. There's still a lot of misunderstanding around solar that we've come across, and I think getting the message out around the positive things is one way we can sort of collectively work together to I guess create a better story and a better outcome for us all in the room. Last challenge there would be recycling. Like, what are we going to do with the panels at the end of life in New Zealand? Are we going to ship them all to Australia or put them in a big hole? So yeah, that's the challenge. We need to come up with a solution for that. People are asking, the councils are asking, and we need a good story around that. So look, thank you so much, and happy to take questions at the end.